for being here today, even though it's a busy Sunday before penultimate. So, I wanted to discuss the US pop music industry and the wealth gap. So, in the United States, there are thousands of talented artists that are capable of producing popular songs. And the most famous artists that you know, such as Madonna and Bruno Mars, they earn millions or even billions of dollars a year. And all musicians follow various techniques to stay looped in the music industry, but not all of them survive. And I bet one thing you didn't know was that all the musicians you know, they are only covering 0.2% of the artists that span across the United States, and 90.7% of them are actually undiscovered. So today, I will first share a personal story that inspired why I decided to research about this. Then I will introduce key musical and financial terms, the evolution and past trends of the music industry, the current market statistics and events, and the wealth gap. Then I will share my research question, the key arguments, the implications for artists looking forward. So, my musical journey started when I was a 5-year-old little girl and I played the cello. And in 9th grade, I started to love singing. And so in 9th grade, I told my parents, "Hey Mom, Dad, I think I might want to major in music." And they hit me with, "Honey, if you do that, you're really not going to make any money." And so I was quite heartbroken because I could have been the next Yo-Yo Ma or the next Biba Doobie. But then once I did this research presentation, I soon realized that they were right. So musical terms are, I wanted to define pop music, and those are genres including rock, country, western, rhythm and blues, soul, and other music. And then as for tiers in Spotify, tiers means the amount of listeners that a certain artist has. So tier 1 is the top 500 artists, and the others are listed below. Okay, this is kind of a long list, so I'm just going to pick a few of the most important ones. So volatility is the rate at which the price of a stock increases or decreases over a particular period, and royalty exchanges is an international concept, but it is an American company for buying and selling royalty assets of any type, but it's mainly related to music. So for the evolution of the music industry, it actually started in the late 19th century. People understood that it's not just a hobby, but it can be used to make money. And in the early 20th century, the radio spread music widely, such as genres of jazz, blues, and rock and roll. And what was pretty interesting was that rock music was actually more commercialized towards the middle class after World War II. And so since the 1970s, disco, rap, and country music emerged. One quote that I really liked was by Jamie Block, who is a former Capitol Records recording artist and a Merrill Senior financial advisor. And he says, "Musicians and artists are a rare breed. They've had the courage and fortitude to risk it all and follow their dreams. However, these personality traits don't always translate into prudent financial planning." So these are some current statistics for the United States music industry. Currently, we have the highest digital music revenue with $17.7 billion in retail and $11.3 billion wholesale. And the influence of the US spreads far beyond the country's borders, and we are a trendsetter of the global music industry. As of now, we have 45,519 businesses in the music sector, such as bands, independent musicians, vocalists, jazz artists, and more. And as of December 2024, 66% of Spotify's global top 50 playlists are from US-based artists. So another pattern that I found was between music rights and stocks. So I found that the top artists recently sold rights to their catalogs for multiples of 15 to 20 times the yearly revenue, which means that they're putting more risk, but they could earn more rewards in the end if everything goes well. And for royalty exchanges, they're selling rights in multiples of as high as 15, and cash flows are necessary for successful financial products. Now, a current event that kind of really affected the music industry are the Trump tariffs that were opposed on April 3rd, and this caused declines in every stocks in the music sector area. There are significant psychological effects because higher prices deterred the amount of spendings. And while there wasn't much effect on the live events and streaming services, there was a huge financial decline in radio and live concert sectors. And currently in 2024 and 2025, artists who want a sustainable career cannot survive on just fame or talent alone. And even the most famous musician, Taylor Swift, says that she cannot just focus on songwriting to continue her career. So artists who want a sustainable career have to strategically post on social media every day, and new music is being released on streaming platforms. Expectations are high as fans look for quality and authenticity, even in a 30-second TikTok video, and fans even have shorter attention spans. Artists also need to create cost-efficient tours to promote music. However, these costs are being canceled or even cut in half because they are so expensive, and tours are just not for the middle class. And lastly, among the artists, there is great financial illiteracy as artists have to navigate legal and financial bureaucracy and complex copyright rules. And like I mentioned before, the publicity of artists is very small, and the artists that you know today, you only know 0.2% of them, and 90.7% remain undiscovered, with 6.8% of them on the rise. In addition, 87.4% of independent artists say that they are unable to financially sustain themselves through this career of music. And some other statistics are that 82% of artists are unsigned, 33% never sell any albums at shows, 24% of musicians has less than 50 subscribers on platforms, and 15% of artists only sell one album yearly. And this is pretty bad because Spotify's top 1% of artists receive 90% of all streaming money and touring benefits. So this is just a graph of the net worth of the richest pop artists, and as you can see, Rihanna earns about $1,800 million a year. And what's pretty sad is that this graph only showcases the around 0.2% of artists who are actually able to earn a lot of money through this career. So my research question is, what factors into the huge wealth gap between successful and unsuccessful pop artists in the United States? So my key argument looked at 5 different factors. First is the family background. Does economic background influence the wealth gap? Second is the diversity of the music portfolio. Is diversity or similarity of music genres a factor in success of wealthy pop artists? So is it better for artists to stick to one genre, or is it better if they spread themselves out across multiple ones? Third is the listener consistency. Is a steady stream of listeners or a sudden burst better for the most income? Second to last is the past performance. Is past performance an indicator of success? And lastly, looking at smaller artists, how does smaller artists' revenue compare to that of tier 1 artists? So for the family background, I found out that people of wealthier backgrounds tend to have higher chances of success. And some of these people included Taylor Swift, Adam Levine, Lady Gaga, Ariana Grande, Miley Cyrus, Ed Sheeran, and Lana Del Rey. However, I wanted to look at a case study in which someone of a lesser wealthy background was able to rise to success. So my first case study was Adele. She lived in poverty with a single mother, but her first big hit was when she was 19 years old, and it was called Chasing Pavements, and this happened because she was exposed to a large audience through the Saturday Night Live. My second case study is that of Dolly Parton. She was also raised in poverty with 11 siblings, but one thing that influenced her into music was having a maternal grandfather who loved to play the fiddle and make music. This one guy named Billy helped her to get onto the Knoxville radio, the TV show Cass Walker's Farm, and Home Hour, and in 1967 she appeared on the Porter Wagoner show, and she was able to gain millions of followers through her songs. And lastly, I wanted to look at Beyonce, who was actually from a wealthy middle-class family, and her father was a businessman. Once her family saw that she had very high potential, they made sure that she would become famous through her childhood music group, Destiny's Child. So the second factor that looks into the success of these artists is the portfolio diversity. So this data set and the graph that I grabbed was actually from Spotify's monthly listeners for 1.1 million artists in 2019. And the portfolio of genres of top 500 streaming artists in 2019 compared to the growth of monthly listeners of individual artists such as Taylor Swift, Drake, Ariana Grande, and Kanye West shows that the volatility of streaming revenues. And when we spread this risk across the top 500 artists, genre diversification and portfolio diversity greatly reduces the volatility of revenues. And in addition, being a multi-genre artist actually has a lot of benefits, such as versatility, adaptability, crossover appeal, expanded audience reach, as well as creating a broad fan base from various demographics and geographical locations. And some examples of artists with multi-genre success are the Beatles, Miley Cyrus, Madonna, and Taylor Swift. The third factor is listener consistency, and there's actually a low volatility anomaly, which is when stocks with lower volatility outperform those of higher volatility. And this is the reason why artists such as Bob Dylan, Bruce, and Neil Young were able to sell their rights for as high multiples of their recent revenue. The fourth factor is past performance, and through this graph, we can see that the top 100 artists actually performed worse in the following 2 years. And there's also another trend called the natural reversion, which is when listenership decays for off-cycle artists who are artists that who don't consistently put out music. And lastly, for smaller artists, we can see that Tier 2 artists actually grow twice as fast as Tier 1 artists. So in this case, it is better to be a smaller artist rather than one who is pretty popular right now. So some industrial patterns are that of industry growth, the average income per artist remains low due to the sheer volume of new entrants, but the fastest growth is among small, independent, and direct-to-fan artists in both revenue and audience share. And as for case studies, we can see that social media is actually a pretty big factor in determining how many views and how successful an artist will become. And some people include Olivia Rodrigo, Lil Nas X, and Doja Cat, who actually became pretty famous after sharing their music on social media platforms. And lastly, looking at the market, it is expanding rapidly and is expected to reach $149.91 billion in 2029, which is a 28% increase in streams. So this is a call to action for all the people who want to be independent artists in the future. So one is to build a personal brand. Second, leverage social media and digital platforms. Make sure to master independent music production and collaborate with other musicians. Promote music effectively, have live shows, and be consistent and have patience. And for the next 2 points, I thought these were the most important. So the first is managing income. Taylor Parks, one of the co-writers of Ariana's best songs, actually says that her bank account isn't from her songwriting, it's from various different investments outside of the music industry, and she says that diversifying one's income is necessary to making ends meet. And she says some of the things she did was having a gig editing videos, teaching art, or even simply stocking milk at a coffee shop. And second, for the artist, it is important to consider several questions when selling the music catalogs. First, who owns music? Second, is there a plan for the money received from the sale? Third, what tax implications accompany the sale of the music catalog? Fourth, what conditions can be actually built into the sale to make everything easier? Fifth, how will copyright termination rights be managed? And lastly, who will be a part of the financial management group and how will the shares be procured? One of the best quotes that I got from this research was by Violet, who was an independent artist. She says, to be successful, one, you need great art. Your art needs to be better than your influencing, and it needs to be really exceptional. Second, you have to be a salesman, which is what we figured out through this presentation. And lastly, she says, you have to be lucky. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions,